It's been traditional practice for singers to begin their recording careers with standard selections of opera arias or the usual songs by Schubert or Schumann or Strauss, for example. And a lot of the reason for that, I think, is the scarcity of listenable, singable music by so-called serious composers in the second half of the 20th century. But you broke that mold by seeking out for your first CD with Electra recordings pieces from among that small body of enjoyable music from the second half of the 20th century. And I certainly admire you very much for having done that. How did you go about choosing the material for that first CD?
The first piece that was discussed with the record company, with Nonsuch, Electra Nonsuch, was Barber's Knoxville Summer of 1915, and they were particularly interested in having me record this piece and gave me complete freedom to choose what other repertoire I wanted to for the rest of the recording. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested in making sure everything was in English, because I felt that since I have, of course, the strongest bond with that language, it being my own language, that it would be easier for me in terms of presenting my first recording, and also that the things that I can hopefully do well come across best probably in my own language.
I wanted to ask you specifically about that Barber work.
It's a real favorite of mine and had been before I recorded it as well. I had suddenly, around the time of the recording, all of these connections with that text. First of all, it hadn't been that long since in school I had read A Death in the Family by James Agee, which is the novel from which this text comes. And I had also performed in a new opera by William Mayer called A Death in the Family. I played the part of the mother, and that was, of course, based on the novel. So all of these things happened within a few years of each other, and I felt also with my family history, coming from Tennessee, that I was born in Nashville, not Knoxville, but and though I grew up in the Midwest, I still have many relatives in the South.
It has such a dreamy quality to it. I think it probably resonates with many of us who grew up in the East and spent those warm summer nights.
Yes, you can have summer nights, starry nights. Well, maybe you can't have starry nights everywhere, but sitting out on a lawn is something that we can all associate with.
Is it a difficult piece to sing, or is it something that you look forward to performing when you do?
It's very natural, speech-like. I don't find it particularly difficult. I think the greatest difficulty when I come to a performance of this is working out with the conductor the moments when the orchestra really needs to be careful not to cover me.
Right. You have a new recording out, a wonderful recording with our own Kent Nagano, who is, of course, conductor of the Berkeley Symphony and frequently heard here on KPFA. How is it working with Kent?
Oh, it's terrific. This was not the first time we had worked together, but and we've worked a couple times since. And we have some jobs coming up, and we hope to. These are the Cantaloupe songs of the Auvergne that we've recorded, and they're about half of them, and we're going to finish up in the next couple of years with the rest of the recording. He's great to work with, a real down-to-earth. His ego doesn't get in the way like it often happens with some other conductors. So I feel like he's a real colleague, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that in a working situation.
Tell us a little bit about singing those songs. They're based in folk songs, but they can't be terribly easy to sing.
The difficulty I find with those is, of course, the language, and these are sung in Auvergnat, which still exists in France, but not a language that's living in the same way as French is, and it's really very different from French. Though there are many people that still speak this language, they differ, many of them, on how to pronounce certain things. So I did work with one woman from the area of France where they're still speaking Auvergnat, and she was terrific, and so I guess she'll assume that my diction is correct, but I'm not certain about some other people in the town. So that's the greatest difficulty. But the tunes themselves are so wonderful and so are really not far from my own experience of folk music in this country.
You performed both solo recitals as well as sung in opera. Which do you prefer?
Oh, they're both very different. I suppose I usually get the greatest amount of satisfaction and gratification from doing a recital. I think this comes primarily from the fact that I'm much more in control of how the evening or afternoon goes than I am with opera, which has many more elements and many more ideas to work with than my own. But when opera works just right, and you agree with the director and the conductor and the set designer and the costume designer and your colleagues, there's really not much that can beat it. But it just doesn't happen all that often that everything clicks.
What roles would you like to try?
I'm going to be singing Sophie in Rosenkavalier this spring for the first time
That's
in
a perfect
Houston.
match. Yeah.
And I'm hoping to do Mélisande sometime in Pélias, Debussy's opera. And I'm going to be doing a new Handel role soon, Theodora, with Peter Sellers directing. And so those are the new operas coming up.
When you put together a leader recital or a solo recital, what kind of a balance do you try and achieve in that? How do you go about selecting the music? And
It really varies. Sometimes I like to stick with a certain theme. It depends on what I'm interested in at the time. This year I'm working a lot with Debussy, and though I'm not singing a complete Debussy program here in Berkeley, because I've actually sung Debussy here before, or in the area before, I'm getting ready to record a lot of Debussy songs later in the year. So it depends on what my recording schedule is, what the certain specialties might be of a particular artist I'm working with, and just some songs that I may have heard in the last couple of years that I was just dying to program.
Essentially what's on your mind at the time. Then.
That's right. That's right.
You have a recording that came out a few months ago of music from American composers, American musicals, and various pieces. Would you talk a little bit about that? I'm
especially happy with this recording. Just it was so much fun to put together. And this is all music of 4 composers in particular that wrote not only for the music theater, but also actually at some point in their lives wrote for opera. And that's Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim and Kurt Weill and Mark Blitzstein. We had many different arrangers come up with new arrangements for most of the songs. They all come from shows, and it was a great amount of fun to put together. It was sort of like getting back to the music, which I think many of my colleagues, like myself, grew up with, this music of our own country and a special kind of music theater that we have. The music of Mark Blitzstein is something that it was very popular at the time, I know, and then it sort of went into an eclipse. He was sort of an American Kurt Weill in a sense. I mean, I know he had a very definite political bent to a lot of the material that he did. What were the songs that you did on the recording, the Mark Blitzstein songs? I Wish It So, from Juno, a song that we've paired with a Stephen Sondheim song called Never Get Lost, and a wonderful song, a wonderful song called In the Clear. Were these from operas, or were these solo pieces that he had written? No, these are from music theater, from shows that he wrote. And I think the thing about Mark Blitzstein, as you mentioned, there's a strong political bent, and I think that those subjects become unpopular quickly. So during their time, it's harder to keep those ideas going, and so they're not performed very often. Well, I'm glad somebody's performing them. Do you have any new recordings that are coming up, things that are either in the can or things that are planned or that we can expect to look forward to in the coming year or so? I actually just recorded the role of Kay in OK by the Gershwins. So that should be released sometime maybe in the late winter or spring. And again, that's on Nonsuch. That was a terrific project. And I have a recording coming up of Debussy songs with James Levine at the piano. That will probably not come out for many months, maybe in the fall. And I have some opera recordings coming up that I'm going to be recording, but won't be out for a while as well.
Did you get to choose the material on the Debussy recording? Did you choose the songs that you wanted?
Yes, I chose everything, and so that's all I'll say about it. It's I mean, some of them are done quite often, but there's a group of songs there that is. Some of the songs have only recently been published, and it's been exciting.
Oh, we'll look forward to it. Thank you so much for taking time out from your very busy schedule to talk with us today.
You're welcome, Dan. Thank you.